Well, good morning, church. Thank you for joining us for our daily devote. Today we're in Exodus chapter 5, and as I read Exodus chapter 5, it makes me think of how hard it is for us to understand God and God's actions in our life in the moments in which we live. Much easier to look back and understand it. I don't know, have you ever thought that if you're pleasing God, then He is going to make your life kind of go good, everything's going to be steady. And if something's out of whack in your life, then our first question, kind of like Job's friends, is how did I mess up? You know, sometimes we can be absolutely pleasing God, and yet the result, the circumstances in our life can be disruptive, can even be negative. And I think we see this in Exodus chapter 5 as Aaron and Moses go to Pharaoh and ask for a time for the people to be released to go and make sacrifice to God for 3 days and come back. And they've done just what God wants them to do. They've won the support of the people in the previous chapter. And now what happens? Pharaoh, instead of saying yes, Pharaoh puts more pressure on the nation, which puts more pressure on Moses and Aaron. He tells them they have to make bricks without straw, which is almost an impossible process. See, the Egyptians would get the mud and they would form the bricks, and the straw was provided. They could add in with the wet mud, and it became that binding effect that would hold it together. But now they wouldn't get given any straw. If they wanted straw, they had to go and get it themselves. And their quota of bricks were not reduced. So all of a sudden they found themselves not able to make the bricks, and they were under the harsh attack of the ones who were over them for not keeping up with their quota. And so they become upset, which then makes them upset at Moses and Aaron. And again, they're right in the center of God's will, but they can't understand it because they're living in that moment. If we keep reading just in a few chapters, we'll see how God intervenes supernaturally and how God brings the plagues and bring these things that will ultimately free the nation of Israel from slavery. But they didn't know it at the moment. They just knew they didn't like the situation they were in. So I think it's a challenge in our life to not somehow think that if something is off in our life, if we're going through some negativity, some hard times in our life, it doesn't mean that we've displeased God. We could be right in the center where God wants us to be, and God is about to do something. He may be preparing us, or He may just be making up us a picture to the world around them, how we're able to have hope and have trust in God, even in tough circumstances. And so just be careful not to connect how you feel about life in the moment and if you're pleasing God or not, because you have to separate the two. Looking back, you can see it, and it will make more sense, but in the moment you live, understand you can have all God's love, you can have all God's grace without having all God's answers. So I hope it encourages you this morning. Continue with the Daily Devo. And again, we're so glad you're part of this. Continue tomorrow and have a blessed week.